work. All right, so this is the start of period 3, which is the post-classical period from 600 to 1450. And one of the most important things that's going to happen during this time period is going to be the rise and expansion of Islam, and then how Islam is going to start shaping different regions as it expands, and then how these Islamic empires are going to start interacting with each other. So real quickly, let's talk about Islam. I know y'all should have covered this a bunch last year, but just as a refresher. All right, you have Muhammad, who is the prophet of Islam, is not a holy figure, is not God, nothing. He's just the prophet. Islam views Muhammad as the final prophet of God. He was born to a merchant family. In 610, he started having visions and receiving revelations. And so, as Islam starts to develop, you have the Arabs who are in control of the different provinces at this point who are going to see Islam as a threat because Arabs were polytheistic. And so now you have this new monotheistic religion coming out that's going to be very threatening. And so over time, as Muhammad sharing his revelations, and they're recorded down into the Quran, which is the holy book for Islam, he's going to start gaining followers. And then, like I mentioned earlier, as his message about, like I said, this one God is going to spread, it's going to bring him into conflict with the elites who were ruling Mecca at the time. And so after preaching there for a while, he has to flee Mecca in 622 and goes to the city of Medina, which is the Hijra, which is the migration, and is also the starting point for the Islamic calendar. So as we go forward and we're reading documents, you have to pay attention to dates, because if it's an Islamic source, odds are the date is probably going to be different than a European source because their calendar is, 600 years off. So, as I'm sitting here eating my yogurt, as Islam began to spread, they created what was called the Ummah, which is the community of the faithful, the community of believers. And they're going to come up with their own legal and social code. And there's a lot of similarities between Islam and Christianity and Judaism. They recognize a lot of the same things, so we'll start to see parallels between those. And then as Islam spreads further and further, you get the creation of Dar al-Islam, which is anywhere that Islam is practiced. Like, it's the whole expanse of where Muslims live. So it's anywhere in the world where Islam is practiced. Eventually, Muhammad dies, and so you're going to have a split in Islam to determine who is going to take his spot. Like, do you have his direct descendants? Do you elect a new one? Whatever. So this is where you get the split in Islam between the Sunnis and the Shias. The Sunni believed, like, in the original order of successors, like how they were doing everything, like pick somebody. And then with Shia, they believe that it should be Muhammad's descendants. And so originally, that's the only reason why you have a split in Islam, was it had to do with the successor. Eventually, over time, their religious doctrine and ideology starts to shift. And so the two become these different sects of Islam. Like, you have, to give you an example and another parallel, like in Christianity, you have Catholics and Protestants. So it's kind of the same thing. Merchants are going to play a huge role in Islam with the spread of it and everything. So merchants are very, very important. They're going to establish merchant communities in the Indian Ocean region, and I'll talk about that in a second. You get a group of people called the Sufis, who were mystics. So they're Islamic missionaries and mystics, and they focused on deepening, like, your spiritual awareness for Muslims, not so much like strict political or religious doctrine, but they're going to help spread the religion. So it's primarily merchants, as they go from place to place, that they are going to really start spreading Islam. All right, so speaking of Islam, in the Indian Ocean region. After the collapse of the Gupta, it takes a while for India to kind of reorganize itself. It finally does in the form of the Sultanate of Delhi, or the Delhi Sultanate. You'll see it both ways. And that was from 1206 to 1526. It was established by Islamic conquerors who took control of northern India. They set up Delhi, which is right over here, as their new capital. For a while, they're going to be one of the most prominent states in the Islamic world. The Sultan really didn't extend much power past Delhi. They weren't very centralized. They didn't have a bureaucracy. They didn't have any regional administrators or anything like that. And most of their rulers ended up being so bad that they all got assassinated. So that's the extent of what you need to know. So India is still really decentralized for a while. When we get to the Indian Ocean basin, the way Islam is going to spread is because of the monsoons. And y'all should recognize what these are from our trade activity last week. So you have the winds that blow in different directions twice a year. And so merchants learn how to use those. They develop technology to help them in the Indian Ocean. You have dhows, which were the ships used by Persian, Indian, and Arab sailors. And then later on, you have the junks, which are the massive Chinese ships that were used for commercial expeditions. So as people are going all over the place, you see how so many of these trade routes come from the Middle East. And it's going to be these merchants like the Sufis that are going to help spread Islam. So a couple of other areas in the Indian Ocean basin that you need to be aware of that are really important during this time period, and we'll come back to them when we talk about the trade networks later in the time period. You have Srivajaya, which is it's in power from 670 to 1025. So right here, everything in purple. They're located in Sumatra. They have a very powerful navy. They have to, because everything's in the Indian Ocean. And what they end up doing, the way they take power, is they're going to force a bunch of the port cities in the area to recognize their authority, because they do control the Strait of Malacca, which is going to make it easier for people to go from India to China for trade. They're going to tax trade ships that come through there, because it's a lot easier to go through the strait than it is to cross up here. And so, like I said, they're taxing trade ships. People have to recognize their authority, and they're going to be in charge of maintaining these sea routes until 1025, when you're going to have another group that takes power. So the next place in the Indian Ocean in Southeast Asia that you need to know about is Malacca, on the Strait of Malacca. So Strait of Malacca is right there. So you get the city of Malacca. They're close to Singapore, and they're going to eventually start dominating trade after Srivajaya. And again, also, they're going to have a powerful navy, and they are going to gain power through controlling maritime trade. So trade is going to become extremely important in period 3, and whoever controls trade routes is going to end up being able to exert lots of power and influence on other areas. So I'm going to record another video that's going to talk about the Islamic caliphates and explain how they are successors of the Persian Empire. So that will be the next video.